Thanks for joining. Hey, I'm going to start off usual with a few announcements, and then I'm going to hand it over to our president here. Um, I think most of you have gotten to the point we really don't have to do this, but if you need assistance in renaming yourself, please reach out to the tech team, Chuck and Sue here today, if you need any help with that. I am in the office here today. I'm going to be here till 3 o'clock if anybody wants to stop by. I'm actually in the ballot room right now. There's a couple items here. I'll be back here tomorrow, probably from noon to 4, and on Monday, there's a staff meeting at 9:30, probably ends around 11. I'll be here from 11 to 3. If there's some items or if there's things you need to pick up or you want to come by. There's still no news on Sean's replacement, and that hasn't been posted yet. Some of you are getting email notifications from Sterling about a background check. I think they're sending them out in batches. So most people have gotten one, but not everybody. But if you do get it, here's a couple things. Make sure you check your spam folder, your junk folder. You might have a couple different folders possibly could be in. Check there. And if you see it, or you got to look for it, you got like 72 hours. This is something new to respond back. So not everyone's gotten it, and if you haven't gotten it, I'll try and track down. I'm gonna maybe check with Taylor on that, but I think they're coming in batches because it's just not us. It's all the volunteers in the University of Maryland Extension. There's thousands, so I think that's what they're doing. They can't send it all out at once. I think there's some limitations on that, so they will be coming. The class for 2025, I've sent out the notification for registration, which will open this Friday at 6 o'clock. So I've already sent the email out for this year. So we're putting on our newsletter, our website with Renew and Willie's help, that if you didn't get in, I think it was the last Friday, we're starting to take a list for 2026. So this year's class is a hybrid. It's mostly online, but we have 3 Saturdays we're asking people to attend, mandatory. The key one I want to tell you guys about is July 13th. So that's the one where we have the job fair. So if you have are you in charge of a committee or you work with a group and you want to kind of showcase your program, hold that day. It'll be in the afternoon. So that seems to work the best and most equitable to try to showcase all our activities that we do. It's July 13th. Orientation is May 18th. I'm going to probably be working on the schedule in the next week or so, but I just want to give you the heads up. July 13th is the big day, and I did send out letters for folks that had no service hours or less than 10 I'm not kicking anybody out. I just want to hear back from you to make sure that, quite honestly, are you still with us? I mean, living, and have you moved? Are you still interested? So we really haven't cleaned off our list, our membership list in some time. So I'm just updating that. But if you are one of those folks that have 0 or less than 10, please make sure you're not on that same list again. That's real important. So I'm just trying to raise kind of our standards, keep our integrity, that we're asking for 20 hours of service. There's a number of people who've done it, but for whatever reason, they didn't record it successfully. So we want to try to work on that this year. So at this point, I think I hit my major points. I probably missed a few, but I got my crew, Renew and Linda, they'll follow through next. So I'm handing it over to Renew. Thank you, Renew.
Thanks so much, Steve. Welcome everybody to our April meeting. The year is certainly flying by. I just have a few brief announcements, and I will also just flag that our board secretary, Carol, will share written announcements. So you'll have links to email addresses and so forth. So let me just briefly run through those announcements and mention points of contact. So the very first announcement that we have is a recruitment for the Speakers Bureau. There are two types of positions available, recruitment for schedulers and recruitment for speakers. Our key contacts will be Cindy Langstaff and Deborah Kleinberg. And of course, Carol will have that detail in the announcements on how to reach Cindy or Deborah. The next reminder was about sign-ups for plant clinics and urban gardening. So please feel welcome to sign up and volunteer at the open positions. And there will be, I'll actually post the link that you can use to reach the signup.com link and post your name. Look forward to volunteering there. The key contacts there are Anne Claxton and Irfana Ali for plant clinics, or Anne Claxton and Lana Shea for urban gardening. So please contact them if you have any questions. The next announcement is regarding the 2024 Maryland House and Garden Pilgrimage Tour. So the event will take place on May 18th and the ticket will include 11 properties. If you're interested, please see the written announcements again and you'll find more details on how to get tickets. And then finally for me, please mark your calendars for the May plant swap. This very popular plant swap will be held on May 9th at the fairgrounds and it starts at 12 noon and there'll be more information in next month's edition of the seed. So please keep an eye out for that. So with that, I will turn the virtual mic over to Linda for another announcement and we'll go from there.
We need you. We really do, to fill a few positions. And the first one is the seed editor. Do you love to read, research, write things about gardening? Put things together each month that the master gardeners will love too? And do you like working with other people? Well, maybe you should be the seed editor. Desiree is looking for somebody to work with her during this year, 2024, and then take over as editor in 2025. So if you have editing experience, if you have good organizational skills, ability to work with other people, if you're good using Microsoft Word or processing software, then you're the person that they really want to see. And it should be a really fun job. So if you're interested, contact Desiree Yang. Her email is down at the bottom. Speaking of the seed, we also need two layout designers. So this sounds interesting to me. I don't know. But do you love puzzles? You like fitting things together, articles and photos on a screen? Love working with other people? Do you enjoy creating visually appealing graphic design? Well, maybe you'd want to be one of the design editors. And again, they're looking for somebody to work with them during 2024 and then take over in 2025. So if you have some experience with design software, that would be a real big plus. And understanding how to put those things together and get them ready on time. And if you like to work with other people. Now the seed has like 10 or 15 other people that work with you. So, it's not you in isolation, it's you as a part of a team. So Deborah Petro and Julie Super would be looking for your email if you're interested in doing the layout of the seed. And also we need some folks to help with public relations. Do you like making, designing special event flyers, and getting information out about things that are coming up that relate to master gardeners? If so, Public Relations Committee would like to work with you. Leanne Galletley has come back into that position and she's looking for a co-chair. So you don't have to have a lot of experience. She's willing to teach you whatever you need to know. But if you do have some experience writing announcements or working with different kinds of software, that would be great. Anyway, her email is down at the bottom, Leanne Galletley, and I know she'd appreciate your help. And Arunu mentioned the spring plant swap. It's going to be on Thursday, May 9th. So take and mark your calendars now at 12 o'clock at the fairgrounds. This would be a good time to start digging up and potting your plants. We'll also take garden tools, pots, books, and more. So look for more information in the May seed. All right, I'm going to stop my screen and come back to y'all and turn you over to Gloria for some recognitions this morning.
We'll begin today's recognition by looking at the Speakers Bureau. You've already had an announcement about that. So with the next slide, please. We begin with the Speakers Bureau that wishes to recognize John Thomas, who serves as a scheduler's team lead. So the way it works is Master Gardener schedulers are the liaisons between the Master Gardener speakers and the organizations who are asking for speakers on a certain topic. And then the scheduler makes the connections between the two. And as lead scheduler, John takes on many of the tasks to bring educational gardening talks to Montgomery County residents. We're told that he's patient and kind and unflappable when things go awry, and I guess they sometimes do. And he's also a great problem solver, a creative problem solver. John's leadership is greatly appreciated, and a thank you to John for all you do. We appreciate everything that our speakers do. So next we have the seed. You've mentioned that they're also looking for some people to step up and help with the seed. The editor and staff wishes to recognize Julie Super, who has served as newsletter co-designer for more than 10 years. Julie brings experience and institutional knowledge to the newsletter, beautifully designing the layout and making the seed a quality product that we all enjoy, we like to read, and we're proud of it. She's also fun to work with and a great colleague. And Julie is stepping down at the end of this year, I'm told. And but she served a long time. And Julie, along with co-design editor Deborah Petro, received the Lifetime Achievement Award in 2022. So thank you, Julie, for all you do, and to all the seed staff, because it really is a great newsletter. We all enjoy. And to slide 4 now. Now we turn to social events and intern hospitality. And it's never too late to say thank you. So the interns, that is the class of 2023, wish to thank those master gardeners for the hospitality provided to them in July of 2023. The location was Durwood, and the master gardeners were Blaine Zucker, Karen Seitz, Melissa Siegel, and Ryan Haley, along with the assistance of Sean Seiko. Thank you to all of you for your hospitality. And we'll end with public relations. They've also been mentioned in the announcements this morning, but we'd like to recognize 2 people for their leadership. Ann Kelly cheerfully volunteered to chair public relations last February when Leanne Galletley was out for health reasons. Ann got the word out about spring conference and other events. She inventoried supplies and helped transition to the new system of dispensing public relation materials for plant clinics and community events and information tables. Now Leanne has recently resumed as PR chair, and we welcome her back. Anne is glad to have her back, saying that no one does more for public relations than Leanne. So recognition and thanks to both of you, Anne and Leanne, for all you've done for public relations. Thanks very much.
Well, it's time to introduce our speaker for today. Ann English is a certified professional landscape architect. She has a lifelong love of plants and nature. Her design work has been in the private, nonprofit, and government sectors, as well as the academic world, with a focus on plants, designing with plants, and how those plants perform in environments in which they are planted. She also emphasizes stormwater management. She has degrees in American history, architectural history, regional planning, and landscape architecture, and is the manager of the Montgomery County Rainscapes Program of the Department of Environmental Protection, and has been gardening since she first planted zinnias with her father at age 5. So I'd like to welcome Ann today for our program. Thanks, Ann.
Thanks a lot. I guess I should share a screen and then I can start my slides. So. All right, so thanks for having me today. I'm here to talk about reducing stormwater runoff and increasing biodiversity with rainscapes. And as the introduction said, I am with the Department of Environmental Protection. So I'm going to give you a little bit of information about watershed health, and then just show you some examples of what rainscapes look like and what our incentives are. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the incentives. And then I'm going to talk about rainscapes and biodiversity, and show you what it looked like before and how you can really transform a space using a rainscape, and then how to figure out where to put it, and then what some of our resources are. So where we fit in the county government is we are a program in the Watershed Restoration Division in the Department of Environmental Protection, and that's an executive agency. And Rainscapes has been working since I started, and even before I started, to educate and provide technical assistance and incentivize private property owners to install environmentally friendly landscape solutions, which we call rainscapes. These solutions we also call gardens. They're not always gardens, but I'm going to focus on the garden pieces today. We want to reduce that runoff. And then you can see from this little slide here that the division, in my time at DEP, which is 15 years, has really grown. Watershed restoration did not previously include some of these elements, but we've developed them over time. And you may have heard of the Tree Montgomery program, which provides free canopy trees to people, which is paid through the tree fund. And if you're a resident of Montgomery County, you can request free canopy trees to be planted by the county on your property. These are different than street trees. These are private trees, and they're planted on your private property. So Rainscapes is similar, except that you do have to pay, and then we rebate a portion back. We have a lot of resources on our website. Our website was changed on March 6th, so things are not where they used to be, and I'm still finding things that are missing. So if there's something that you've relied on in the past from the Rainscapes resources page, I'll talk about that a little bit, like where you could find resources, but they're not all back up, and they may not go back up. You may have to ask for them, and we can certainly send you PDFs. So stewardship is a new section. Rainscapes and Tree Montgomery and the Watershed Outreach Team has been rolled into that section. We are the MS4 responsible agency to take care of the health of our watersheds. And what are we dealing with? So the reason you want me to talk about stormwater runoff is you've likely seen something like this. This flow of water was coming from a large property through a couple of backyards. It actually came through a brand new rainscape. The rainscape didn't get blown out, but you can see that it wasn't fully established. It was carrying a lot of sediment. So we're trying to do things that will be better for the environment than allowing that kind of silt to be washed away, our soils to be washed away. And because a lot of people don't realize that in an MS4 system, which is the municipal separated stormwater system, those are those pipes in the side of the road. You can see this down here. There's a little pipe and there's a little slot in the side of the road. This is not like your mailbox. This actually puts it in a pipe that takes it straight to the stream. So if you're washing your car in the driveway, or you have salt on the sidewalk or your driveway, and then it rains, it washes off if you have paint that you've spilled and it washes off, or you have oils, they all wash off. They all go into the storm drain, and then they get concentrated, and then it's like a fire hose that releases out into our streams. And this has really severe consequences. And it's been done all over the country, and nobody thought it was a problem initially. They thought the solution to pollution was dilution by putting it straight out into the landscape. So in Montgomery County, we have laws against fertilizers and pesticides. It's a state fertilizer law, but there's also a pesticide law at a local level. We have laws that are trying to decrease the amount of pollution that goes into the water. The reason Rainscapes got started really was because an analysis was done and said, where is all this runoff coming from? Well, people think it's the road, but it's not. It's actually 70% almost on, this is a Glen Echo Heights study, but it holds true in many other areas of the county. It's really coming from your rooftops. It's coming from your driveways. It's coming from your patios. It's coming from your walkways. It's coming from your lawns, honestly, because a lot of lawns are compacted. So people on their private properties need to rethink their yard. They need to rethink how you're managing the land. And you may have seen things recently from Doug Tallamy, Bringing Nature Home, Hometown Habitat was the movie that Catherine Zimmerman made. And she was a local filmmaker, so some of the clips in there are from Montgomery County. But basically what's happened is we've developed. We've gone from a forest to a development, and so we're not all in an ultra-urban situation like the lower right, but we're not in a forest situation either. And a forest would have had between 4 and 10% runoff on the surface. The rest of that water in the water balance was accounted by evapotranspiration. So half of it stayed above ground and half of it went below ground. 25% in a shallow infiltration, they call that, that helps with the interflow, the base flow for our streams. And then the other 25% was estimated to go into our aquifers. So we started to build houses, and that was fine. The environment could handle that. It was a slight reduction in how much went into our groundwater, a slight reduction in how much base flow. So the streams ran all year. They didn't dry up in the summer. They didn't erode. They had eroded, and that's how, because water flows downhill and takes the easiest path. But in the process of creating the streams, that dispersed development did not cause a lot of runoff per se. So then we get into typical suburban development, which is down in the lower left. That's, 20% is now. So now you've lost 5%. So your streams are probably sort of okay. But basically the bottom line is the more we pave, the more we cover, the more we have to reconsider what's happening with the water. And just shoving it in a pipe into our streams and bypassing the whole terrestrial system of soils has caused big negative environmental impacts. So the old approach to stormwater management was to put it into a pipe and then to pipe it to the stream as quickly as you could. It was efficient. It was a straight line. And it was something that was not done by individuals. It was done by, the elected officials, the technical experts, because this was in the 50s and 60s seen as the way to manage this water. But what happens is you concentrate that water flow, and that water flow concentration is causing erosion right here. You can see that. The other thing that happens with those black pipes that are corrugated, they have all those dimples in them. They actually breed mosquitoes. So they're very bad for you as a person immediately. And if you want to get rid of mosquitoes, you would want to get a smooth pipe on the inside rather than a corrugated pipe. Rainscapes was formed with the idea of getting to the source and really working on those 3 principles that were discussed, really probably starting heavily in the 70s, of slowing it down, spreading it out, soaking it in, and really focused on what can you do as an individual? What can you do in your landscape? And you can see that even though this bottom left still has the invasive bamboo in it, they've been transforming it And this is sort of a funky, modern, eclectic version of a rainscape, but the water can soak into this landscape and it's fully vegetated. You know, people have harvested water and then let it overflow into their gardens. We start to call that a treatment train. And you can see in this rain garden on the bottom, the overflow hasn't gotten any plants growing in it yet, but it's armored so that when that water flows through, it doesn't wash away. So just to summarize graphically, historically, stormwater was handled by this very straight line, send it right to the river through all these inlets, all these gray infrastructure inlets. And what I'm talking about today is mimicking an ecosystem and really meandering it, giving it every possible chance. Sometimes it has to be moved to a safer place, but other times it can be soaked in. And sometimes you have to cooperate with neighbors, or you have to think creatively and be a real problem solver. But really, doing this is so bad for us, we have to stop. We just have to stop. That's on an individual, ethical level. So I want to talk a little bit about what happened with the Clean Water Act. If you haven't, you may have seen this before, if you've seen a presentation I've done. So in 1972, we have the Clean Water Act, and the Clean Water Act was really applied to factories and limited how much pollution they could put out into our stream systems or the waters of the United States. In 1987, MS4 systems, so that's not that long ago, 1987, the MS4, which is that municipal separate storm sewer system, and a permit program was included under the auspices of the Clean Water Act. And this expanded that point source definition of factories to discharge pollution from a distributed system like storm drains. And basically it was measuring, how much pollution can you discharge? So in 2000, and then this federal government act delegates to the state to figure out, well, how are you going to do this to do your part to meet the goals of the Clean Water Act? 2007, the Maryland Stormwater Act was amended, and it became effective in 2010, that when you did redevelopment or new development, they added a chapter 5, which had what they called environmental site design. It's also been called low impact development. It's also been called green infrastructure. And yes, it's also been called rainscapes. But they said you had to do environmental site design, or ESD, to the MEP, which is maximum extent practicable, before you instituted a gray infrastructure solution, such as an underground vault or something like that. So then the state says, fine, we've got a bunch of counties. We're going to turn to the counties and say, how are you going to help us meet our goals that we have to report to EPA? And then each county gets what they call a 5-year MPDES MS4 permit. That's a stormwater discharge permit. And our current permit was issued November 2021, and we have a set number of acres we have to control. We have to be monitoring our water to see what are we showing improvements from the things we're doing as a county? And several other agencies also report information and data to the Department of Environmental Protection. If you want to see a general overview of the approach, we do have, this is up online, I'm pretty sure. If it's not, you can email us, but it's also available in 5 different languages right now, and we're working to add more. So what does a rainscape look like? This is just an example of a lawn. Then in this curve, you can see there's the stem of the river birch, same river birch. They were able to fit in a rain garden that takes the runoff from a downspout that was extended underground, and also the turf. Rainscapes have been applied in many settings. And this upper left, this is in a neighborhood that has no storm drain infrastructure. So the road runoff actually runs down through this side area. So the woman changed the surface and made it rougher, which is better for slowing water. There's no permit for that, but I mean, no rebate for that. But then she also converted, leaves the leaves. She converted this into a naturally planted swale, and the water moves safely around her house instead of coming straight into her house. In this planting right here, this is below a pool deck. They actually put rain gardens on top, and you can see this bump right here. That's from the rain garden at the bottom, and then the middle is connected with conservation landscape. So these are native plants and summer exuberance right here, end of summer, and it's managing the runoff from the pool deck and reducing how much gets to the parking lot. And in this scenario down here in the bottom left, someone took all their downspouts and they put them into a large rain garden in their backyard. In each of these examples that I'm showing you, I want to point out that because they're using native plants, they're also attracting and supporting native fauna. We have lists of things that are less attractive to certain fauna, like deer. So rainscapes are basically converting yard spaces into attractive and functional spaces that soak up the rainwater, whether it's retrofitting your driveway, changing the surface of it, which this helps the stream habitat because the water soaks in through the ground and goes into that interflow, and that helps keep the stream wet, even in times of dry. You have a lawn that was in poor condition. You can barely call it a lawn, actually. And now it's been converted into a garden, a conservation landscape right here below the window, close to the building, where you can't have ponding water standing. And then you have a rain garden here. And then you can see the full berm is planted. So this is creating a terrific habitat right outside somebody's front door. Sometimes a rainscape looks like part of a hardscape. And the rain garden stormwater planter on the left is a series of step down boxes. There's a little notch here. So the thing about a rain garden, if you're new to rain gardens, and maybe many of you are familiar with them, but they're like a cup. They are depressed. They have 6 inches capacity for ponding. And then when it's full, it has to overflow. And so that notch gives it a safe place to overflow. And then you can armor it below the splash and have a splash block, and you can gently move that water down instead of just letting it run off. Cisterns and permeable pavements have been very popular, and one of the things that we like to say is we've been improving site ecological function one project at a time. It's very slow work. We have been working with county residents, and people have been coming to our trainings for over 15 years. We've gotten over 13 acres converted, but there's so much more acreage in the county that needs to be changed from just the default mown lawn with compacted soils. So we do have some rebates which have helped incentivize and then give us great pictures to show people of these projects. For example, this rain garden in the upper right, this garden is actually handling water from 6 or 8 houses. And it can do that because there is enough space to build it big enough. Most rain gardens are taking a smaller amount of drainage, typically cleaner, typically from a roof. But in this scenario, it works very well. And actually the rain garden is here. This is conventional landscaping, some native and some non-native plants. But this is what's really solved their drainage problem that was causing problems with the downhill neighbor. It has created a lot of interest visually and ecologically. We do have a few projects. This is a series of rain gardens in a swale that each garden gets its own downspout from, this is in Seneca watershed. Each garden gets a downspout, and that then it overflows into the swale as a safe place to go. I mentioned that our website has flipped. So when you go to rainscapes.org, you can still use that. You will see a couple of things. One, you'll see they've got all our projects listed, and you have to click the button. You click the button and it takes you to a description, kind of a package of information about each project type. It's not all as comprehensive as it was before. but that is how things are arrayed. We are accepting applications. We ask you to review the process. We've asked them to improve the graphic of how they interpreted our process. And then you can apply right here. This feedback button on the right is very simple feedback at this point. I hope that will be improved. Right now, it asks if the page was helpful, yes or no. Under each of those bundles of information is a 2-page PDF with requirements. And on the requirements page, it tells you what we need from you. We tell you about the size. We tell you about where it can go. We tell you what kind of design documents we need, and then what all the steps are. But most of that information is on page 2. We recognize we need to improve that and make that page 1, but please look on page 2, and that will give you the information, the basic information you need. I want you to think about, if you're going to be designing a rainscape garden, whether it's a conservation landscape or a rain garden, these are gardens that handle flow, and that makes it rather different. And we also require 75% native plants and no invasive plants. That seems like a no-brainer, but definitely no invasive plants. There is one study on woody plants that says there's an ecological threshold of 70% native to support, I think it was chickadees. So that's one example where it's been proven. So we've had this conservative 75% native, bring in the rest that aren't invasive, it's fine. And we do accept cultivars. We prefer that you be looking at some of the new information on like double flower forms, but we won't actually say no because of a double flowered form, but we want you to be aware that part of the goal of rainscapes is to support habitat as well as reduce runoff. So these gardens then would have more ecosystem benefits and would support our local pollinators and birds. And the nice thing about plants that are adapted to our soils and climate, even though our climate is changing, is that once you get through that first couple year establishment period, you typically do not have to add extra water. You can have a rain barrel, of course, that overflows and waters them, but you don't have to spend any money really on watering or a lot of time. They take care of themselves. The other nice thing about our plants is, these, and I've said this for years, that these are the plants, when you get the community of native plants together, it's what makes Maryland look like Maryland. So you might come from a different place. You might come from Tucson, or you might come from Australia, and there's nothing wrong with those plants here, but they are not what makes Maryland look like Maryland. And there needs to be a balance. So the thing about these communities, for plant communities, is that they are interrelationships, not only between pollinators and birds and other fauna like insects and herbivores, but they are adapted to the soils. So you could have a complete community that doesn't need spot treatment. It needs the same sun, needs the same soil, and it should do fine. And of course, we have our pesticide law. We don't want you using pesticides in these gardens. If you are doing a rain garden rebate, you have to have impervious surface draining to the garden. We have a $10 per square foot with a minimum of a 75 square foot garden, up to $7,500 rebate based on that square footage. And you have to have a perk test that is passed, and we have a form for recording all of that. I am going to be teaching a class at Brookside Gardens on designing gardens and using native plants. That's on April 13th. I think there's a waiting list right now, but we do have a lot of resources on our website. And the rain garden resources, one thing I want to point out in the rain garden module here is that it references replacing soils with a sandy mix. We will be updating that to recommend that you compost amend your soils as opposed to digging out and replacing your soils. You would dig out and amend, and then you would replace, but you would still have that 6 inches of ponding. Conservation landscaping is another rebate garden, $5 a square foot. And this follows really the Chesapeake Conservation Landscaping Council's guidance on why you need to have ecological gardens. They have to be at least 250 square feet. Again, 75% native plants, and we have been approved by the state to take credit for a ponding conservation landscape. So that would be something where you wanted to put in a rain garden and it didn't pass the perk test. And let's say you were going to do a 100 square foot rain garden based on the amount of impervious area or rooftop draining to it. You would do a 200 square foot conservation landscape, and you would have 3 inches of ponding instead of 6, and that would qualify, except then of course we have the 250 minimum for your plant conversion. But they can look really beautiful and very traditional, whether you're using the creeping phlox and dwarf crested iris and the penstemon. So the penstemon is going to support those bumblebees. Creeping phlox is going to support all those small pollinators that come out early because it's an early flower. Blue indigo is another great plant for bumblebees or Baptisia. River birch supports a lot of butterflies in their foliage, and red cedar, of course, is a bird-friendly plant as well as providing screening. We have the resources on our website for that as well, and you can see in this example. So you've got this does include, catmint and some of the other non-natives. It's got the grasses. This is right after planting. And then you see these stone things right here. These are check dams. So this is getting runoff from the whole house and coming through. And I have a picture later on of what it looked like before. So our rain gardens are usually between 100 and 300 square feet. The conservation landscapes are typically 600 to 900 square feet in our program that come through the rebates. But we're aiming to catch between 1.2 and 2.7 inches of rain. So in a 24-hour period, we want all that rain to stop at the garden. We don't want it to run off. We want it to stop in the garden. That 90% of our storms are less than an inch. So that means that most of the time you have stopped the runoff in its tracks with this habitat garden. 2.7 inches is what is considered to be channel protection. So one is a water quality and one is a water quantity target to reduce damage to streams. So these two rain gardens, this one you can see is stepped. It actually has 2 cells here. And this rain garden, I think this is actually at Montgomery College by the greenhouse. And last time I was there, it looked like it needed a little bit of work, but this is what it looked like early on with the sedum and stuff. So, but habitat and stormwater runoff with conservation landscapes and rain gardens can be simultaneously done. And this is an example at the Washington Episcopal School from last year. So you can see there's this warehouse building here, and it was actually this entire building, 5,000 square feet, was running down here and then cruising through this playground. And there's a drop here. So this is actually like a 2-foot drop. So the solution that the designer developed was to bring the water down through and slow it with this armored swale and brought it under the fence into a conservation landscape. And then it ponds right here in the rain garden, and then it overflows. And so the kids are actually out there learning how to garden. They're learning to see butterflies. This is sneezeweed right here, the helenium. And then that blue flag iris and the cardinal flowers are supporting hummingbirds. So the school is very pleased with it. They've done a website, and I'm looking forward to seeing how it looks this spring. So if you got any questions, Steve, I can take a few right now, or I can keep on going.
Anne, I've got a couple of questions here you might want to address before moving on.
Okay.
One of them is from some folks who work with our Baywise program, and they've had a request for assistance come in from someone who is moving to Montgomery County from another area. They've already purchased their plot. They're interested in doing some environmentally sustainable landscaping in order to establish trees and plants prior to their actual move. would
Mhm.
they be eligible for working with somebody in the Rainscapes program and eligible for a rebate if they're putting that in?
Yeah, so two things. One, if they own the property, they're already owning, but they don't live there, the answer is yes. They are not in the city of Gaithersburg, the city of Rockville, or the city of Tacoma Park. Then they are eligible because their property pays into the water quality protection charge, which is what funds our program. If they want canopy trees, they can apply through Tree Montgomery, and that would install a 15-foot tree or more, however many that is agreed upon on their property at no charge to them. And if they want to install a rainscape and get it going before they move, they could still apply. I am a bit short-staffed, and we're trying to keep up, but they should not install it unless it's a rain barrel before we approve it, because if they install it first and then apply, we will deny that application because we want to make sure it's done through our standards and through our process. And we don't want someone to jump the line by just doing it on their own and then bringing it in. That's just not how the program's set up.
Great. And then we had another question come in from someone who lives in a community that has a lot of water that runs off into big rainstorm canals. If the community jointly wanted to have that looked at and figure out how to do a better job of handling stormwater, would someone from your office come to meet with the community at a meeting, take a look at what they've got and give them advice?
We try to do that. We try to meet those community-based problems. It sounds like they've got probably a permitted facility in their community, and that would be something. So we would coordinate with our stormwater maintenance group that does the inspection of those. So I would encourage them to send an email either to rainscapes@montgomerycountymd.gov, or you can send an email to askdep@montgomerycountymd.gov. Either one will find its way to my desk.
Great. And then the third one I'll ask before you move on is a similar question from someone who has a drainage easement for the whole neighborhood in their backyard. And now new development uphill from them is causing a dramatic increase in the amount of stormwater that's coming through. They say they've tried putting in some berms to slow the water, but need some other ideas. So again, is that something that your office would consult with them on?
Yeah, we can take a look at it. It is difficult when you have the drainage easement because those things have to be kept clear. If it's a storm drain easement, then it's under the jurisdiction of DOT. And but their concern is really that the inlets are not blocked and that the water can continue to move. But again, they could contact us and we could see if there's anything we could share that would be helpful.
Great. Thanks. Then I'll get out of your way and let you move on, and I'll continue to record questions as they come in.
All right. Okay, so rainscapes and biodiversity. As I said in the beginning, different names, same idea. We're trying to work with the environment and restore ecosystem services. So here, these two images are actually exactly the same deck, same place. And this is the before and this is the after. But I really want to start with the basic truth. Soils hold a quarter of our plant's biodiversity, and roots are key in terrestrial carbon sequestration, and I should have added, and infiltration. So think about that. If you don't start with your soils, you cannot maximize the amount of biodiversity in a particular space. You want to focus on that because anybody who's been a perennial gardener knows the only time you get a chance to touch the soil really to make any change to it from your end is at the beginning. So the processes of infiltration and carbon sequestration, which is a climate change issue, are linked. And you can look at the different levels of plants that are intercepting water, those layers of plants. in a forest, the canopy, the understory, the shrub layer, the ground layer, and then you keep on going into the rhizosphere, into those roots, into the mycorrhizae. And you can see that you have mammals, you have birds, you have butterflies, insects, all of them are on this vertical column that is a tree, taking advantage and interacting with that. As you get more roots, you get less pollution that comes out of the water. More and more clean water comes out. So you really have to go back to this notion and realize how many places around you do not have effective cover. This is at the Smith Center, which is our environmental ed center in March. And you can see it's mucky. This is at a middle school and you can see it's compacted. This is just like, it might as well be paved. And this is in a neighborhood. You know, you can see the cut through here. And yet you can see from the bikes, it's eroded the tree roots. So the only reason there's any soil there at all. So the lack of cover is degrading our soils, and it increases the speed of the runoff, which then further degrades the situation and reduces biodiversity because it's a very inhospitable environment. So we want to sequester more carbon. It's critical for supporting biodiversity. And the roots are interacting with the soil and adding carbon as they die off, and they're extending the carbon sequestration. Carbon-rich soils are very important. So the Rainscapes program for a long time has said we care about roots. Roots play a large part in how the water gets down. Those root channels, those fibrous roots, this is how water moves from the atmosphere into the soil, into the groundwater. So the goal for the focus on infiltration is that these roots are going to help soil porosity and return water to groundwater storage, and it'll also sequester carbon. Whereas the NRCS in Pennsylvania said, don't treat your soil like dirt. So soil health can change the land, it can change people, and people have, in the organic sphere, have recognized that the nutrient value of food that comes out of organic soils is different than the nutrient value that comes out of poor soils. So we're looking for ways to partner with the ecosystem. So here's the graphic that shows the interception and redistributing. So it slows it down. So it's a drip instead of a gush. You've got the stem flow as the water comes down. I have a beautiful beech tree in my backyard that I enjoy watching every time it rains because the water just accents the texture of the bark. You have grasses and perennials and roots, all the leaf litter. And it's surprising, a 6-inch layer of duff can really slow the flow of water. And then you have the roots and the mycorrhizae that are down here in the soils. So you're trying to manage your nutrients by building projects that absorb and infiltrate water through the soil. And this will help reduce your runoff. And I wanted to show this graphic again. I think it's so important. The reason that we focus on healthy forest soils in stormwater is because healthy forest soils give us clean water. So first thing you have to do is really take a look at your property and understand, is it stable and is it healthy? Or do I need to do things to improve soil health as you start to make your plan? And then you need to think about what part of the stage of vegetative succession am I aiming to be at? And most of our landscapes are right here, the shrubs, very few young trees, young forest. Most of our traditional landscapes have been right in this part of the vegetative succession. And so what happens is all of these early invaders, so to speak, the grasses, the weedy things, you're always pushing them back. And then these trees eventually start to populate, and then you're starting to weed out trees. But this is where people have been trying to hold things in stasis. And there's a growing interest in meadows, which would be down in this early succession. If you look at the conservation reserve easement programs and the warm season grass mixes, you get a tremendous amount of pollution reduction benefit in the first 2 years with the grass buffer. If you look at a mixed oak forest, you want to have the trees in the right place in your horizon. So if you're at the bottom of the hill and you're trying to grow a chestnut oak, that chestnut oak's not going to do as well as this black gum or sugar maple that are used to more mesic conditions. So when you're trying to think about gardens to design, habitats to create, you want to be thinking about where you are in elevation in terms of where the water is. And then you want to think about, well, what is the community that lives down here at the bottom of the hill? And how can I make something that's going to be attractive to me, but also sensible given this, the location and the landscape? So one of the things that might be attractive to you is birds. And so you'd be thinking about your vegetative structure vertically, and different birds live at every different level. This graphic is showing the example of if you want nuthatches, you need understory trees. If you have a lot of understory trees, maybe you have a lot of nuthatches already. But if you're looking for hawks and owls and warblers and those types of bigger birds, you need those canopy trees. And if you're looking for things like cardinals or doves, you're going to need a good shrub layer, because that's where they live. And then the grassland birds, which Redgate Park in Rockville now is really been a haven for grassland birds, because not every bird lives in a forest. So you could have any, it's not that one is better than the other, it's just they're different. So when you're looking at strategies for habitat and biodiversity and rainscapes, you're going to be finding yourself thinking about carbon sequestration because you want healthy soils. But basically, you want to increase your biomass, which means plant more plants. Increase biodiversity. Don't get dependent on one kind of plant. If you like black-eyed Susans, plant a couple of different kinds. Some people would say you can only do that through seed growing. I would say if you can plant a range of cultivars, you are also introducing biodiversity. You want to increase your functional diversity. So what kinds of plants are they? Are they all herbaceous, or do you have woody plants? And then you want to think about, well, what are your plant history strategies? So this is her term, but really she's talking about competitor, stress tolerator, and rootarols. So that Grimes CSR theory, where some plants are highly competitive and they don't play well with others. I'll say river oats. Stress tolerator, things that can be run over. And rootarols, which are those first invaders that might not last so long. And then you want to layer and cluster your plants. So these strategies work well in rainscapes. They support biodiversity, and I'm just going to tack on that they also support carbon sequestration. So how can runoff support biodiversity? So you created this garden in permeable soil that perks, and then it rains, the runoff goes into the garden, and then it goes down into the soil, and then it goes out, and this came up a little fast, but you can see that then you have a basin that's full of water that's supporting all the plants and all the animals that you want to see, the butterflies and the birds, and it's going to create a beautiful setting in your yard while it manages the water. And then that water is going to go down into the soil, replenish your groundwater supply, so you have less runoff, you have healthier local streams, and your plants are more resilient because there's more groundwater to be drawn upon when it's a dry period. So if you can be focused on creating healthy soils, that soil, that carbon is a great filter and cleaning the water, but it's also very good for supporting a wide range of life. So as I said at the beginning, rainscapes manage stormwater. It might look like a pink cloud. Sometimes they look like a big tank. Sometimes it looks like a dish-shaped garden like this one. And they support these multiple ecosystem benefits. You don't have to use extra chemically treated water, so you reduce that kind of water use. You don't have to add extra nutrients, so it's nutrient neutral. And you don't have to use power tools necessarily, and that can get you closer to a carbon neutral environment. Here's an example of a rain box rain garden planter. Water was coming in this way, and then you see the notches. So it ponded, and then it overflowed, it ponded, it overflowed, but Prior to this being installed, there was a sandbag system on the house that kept the basement from flooding. And as a safety measure, this box series, which did have a bioretention mix in it, has an underdrain. And so the water then is guided and released at a safe point so it can go down the side yard. In this example here, it was flooding down here, and they designed an aqueduct that drops into the rain garden, which has full opacora. And when it's kind of subdued, they can see this rock spiral. And then down here in this Garrett Park yard, this was really thin, hard to see that it was even called grass because it was under a full canopy. And now it's fully planted. So when water comes running off the roof, it's slowed down through the landscape. We are roughening the surface. A lot of times when people are starting, they are concerned that, well, I don't want to upset the neighbors. I want, native plants are ugly, which they aren't. But so what can you do? Well, you can do certain things design-wise. You can substitute 1-to-1. I think Echinacea and Black-eyed Susans were some of the first. You can diversify your plantings by using different cultivars, but with the same function. You can stylize a landscape idea, or you can actually go into the full depth of restoration. But for most people, you're starting with substitution and diversification of your plant selection. This is a rain garden, by the way, and the water comes in this way, and then this is the overflow that we're looking at. And you see these sedges that are coming up here? It's interplanted. Over time, you won't even see those stones. I said earlier about creating more biomass and creating layers. So here's an example of a great layered garden. And the water flows into this rain garden, and the conservation landscape is above. Has these multiple layers of shrubs and perennials and ground covers. So at every point, a water drop is running into something. It can't get to the ground easily. It's creating a more resilient and locally diverse landscape. I pointed out this rain garden before. This is in Somerset, and it still looks great after 9 or 10 years. Last I saw it a couple years ago, and it looked phenomenal. This is actually catching, this is a rain garden. There are 2 cells, and it's taking rainwater from 5 townhouses, and this is on common land property. This is an example where it's running through the backyard. They put in a patio, and then you can see how it really dips down. And then this is all interplanted with very tiny little sedges, but that'll all cover in too. And this is another angle on that rain garden that I showed you before with all the layers. So the message is that clean water starts at home with native plants and native soil, and you do that with carbon sequestration. So what can you find in a rainscape? You can find all kinds of cool things. In fact, people get excited to go outside and watch to see what they'll see in the garden. So you might see these bumblebees, and then you'll discover the diversity of bees, and you'll also discover, if you're previously terrified of bees, that usually they're just interested in the flowers. Wasp, a different story, but you'll also see some wasps. You'll see butterflies, big butterflies. You'll see little butterflies. You'll see bees sleeping on flowers. You'll see endangered butterflies. These things are here, and you're giving them a place to find a meal, a place to rest. You're giving them a home. So I want to say that when you're designing your garden, you always want to be experientially rich, ecologically sound, and of the place. What makes Maryland look like Maryland. You want to think big and start small. Avoid those invasive species and have your soil tested. And people say, well, how small? Well, this is an example of 2 planters I did for a class. One was for sun and one was for shade. So this is Pacora, Aurea, Geranium maculatum, Tiarella cordifolia, and Eurybia divaricata in the left-hand pot. These were grown through the Rainscapes Growing Program, which is a native plant growing program that Montgomery College also participates in. And then on the right for sun, Rudbeckia fulgida, Cicerynchium angustifolium, Juncus effusus, Phlox subulata, and Ruellia humilis. So you know, the rule in the pots is a roundy thing, a spiky thing, or a frilly thing. So I followed those rules, and over the course, and then somebody won these pots. So I didn't actually get to enjoy watching them develop, but that was what was going to happen. They were going to be a very full pot and give them several interesting months of plants. Mount Cubit also has done outstanding things with planters and native plants. So don't think that native plants can't go in planters. They absolutely can. You have to maybe treat them differently than an annual planter because they typically are perennial, but they can really also be another way to bring in more birds and butterflies and other interesting critters into your landscape. They look beautiful. They improve water quality. So let me show you a few examples of how we get from a plan to a product. So here's a garden, and there was a plan. This is the before and after. So there was that thin, and here's the beautiful filled in. I showed you a more filled in version earlier in Garrett Park. This was all straw, so it was getting runoff. And then this is that one I showed you in the beginning with the check dams. And so we're just giving that water a chance to slow down, to support the salvias, to support the catmins, to support all these other native plants that are in there, like the phloxes and things. And that's going to be a carpet. This has been a treatment train, and it was catching water in the rain garden here, and then she just kept it going. And then this is actually pervious, although it was not. We were watching it, and we don't do rebates for that form. And I want to show you this lot-to-lot drainage issue. So here's someone, and this is a plan, and this is the plant list to our standards. And it was a grassy slope. And if you just looked at it, if you went out to there and your friend said, well, I have all this water, and you're looking at it, well, that doesn't look so bad. Well, the reality is this yard was getting drainage from a lot of different properties. It was getting water from, I think, 7 different homes. And so it took a lot of plants. So here's the layout, and they did use big plants on this, but you can see when they killed the grass out, they actually then put a burlap layer underneath, and then they put the mulch on top of it. And this is right after planting. So the water is coming here, and you're just like, wow, I had no idea it would cause so much water. But this water was cascading down the hill, coming up onto our patio and onto our house. So after it got planted and filling in, there's the first layer up here by the fence where it starts to slow down, and then it has a grassy panel that runs over before it starts down the hill. And then she made it a zigzag path, and that water then ends up headed that way instead of that way towards the house. So it's a really good solution that's consistent with a beautiful garden, but it's a stormwater tool. Here's another residential project, and when we review a project. So we create these drainage maps, and you can see how it goes from less drainage to darker color, which is more drainage. So this is in the right of way. And we locate the right of way because all our projects have to be on that private property envelope. And all of this area that they are using, and in fact, they have a retaining wall out here. This is actually public, and we would not rebate in those areas. So the plan came in and identified what phase they were going to do for the project. And this, this is some of our record keeping. So there's a plant list. We want to look at spacing. And then it ends up looking like this. So before it looked like this, and then they put in the stepped garden because there's this big hill. So the garden, it's conservation landscape, comes underneath. This is a rain garden planter that then overflows safely around the end. So it's not going to erode. And then it continues on down the slope. And I understand that they've actually planted in the right of way. So it went from this bare ground to being fully planted, developing over time. A lot of habitat value. This is at a multifamily development. They put in large cisterns that were, I think, 1,250 gallons each that then overflow. And in this hillside slope, so you can see they've got baptisia, they've got mountain mint, they've got black-eyed Susans, they've got Casmantium, river oats in here. These are all plants that can take this flow in water, and they've got these pockets of ponding and then continuing to go down. We will accept, if you're worried about mulch washing off, a 3-inch compost blanket is an acceptable alternative. You can put the burlap on, but not as a standalone. So this is just a winter look of a 1,000 square foot conservation slope that was reducing icing at a local high school. It's intercepting ball field runoff, which acts just sort of like a parking lot. So if there are any questions, I can take a couple before I go to the next.
I've got several different topics that are coming in. One of them refers to, and you may have seen it, there's a Washington Post article this morning about HOAs and about the difficulty that residents in some neighborhoods are having when they do some of this work and they get challenged by their HOA. Do you have any words of advice or comment on how that is either changing over time or is just a problem that can't be solved? I don't know.
Well, it is a problem, and I think ultimately it's a legislative solution and also a local HOA solution. So there are two things. One is the covenants in an HOA some are permanent and some are like 20-year covenants, but there can be changes to those covenants. So maybe people need to get on their HOA boards and get the covenants changed, which is not sexy work, but it's necessary work because people are finding themselves in these lawsuit conditions. I know that the state of Maryland recently had a case that upheld a woman's right to have a conservation landscape in her yard that didn't meet, you can't have your grass over 4 inches tall standard that the HOA had. In terms of newer HOAs, I think there's some regulations in place in the Up County that basically have covenants that say if it's a green practice, it can't be denied. So you should always check your HOA covenant because that is it rides with the properties in that development, and it is not, it's not like an elected official, but the HOA board does wield a lot of power. So that would be your first place to start. I didn't see that article because I didn't get a chance to read the paper this morning, but it is a growing issue because a lot of those covenants were put in place before people were aware of this type of approach and all the multiple benefits.
There are several questions that have come in about driveways and permeable surfaces for driveways and the challenges that produces for those of us who are aging and need smooth surfaces if we're using a walker or a wheelchair. Are you going to address that in the end of the presentation, or would you like to say a little bit about that now?
I could say something now. I'm not really, that's not in my slide set, but basically, if you were to use a permeable paver, you would want to get one that was ADA compliant. And porous concrete is another option. The thing about porous concrete is you need it in both cases, but especially with the concrete because of the curing time, you need someone who is qualified and has the training to do it right so it doesn't spall and fall apart. The gap between the pavers is where the water goes. The paver itself typically is not permeable, it's the gap. So you want that gap not to have a problem with a walker or any kind of, high heel or something like that. So that's number one, is you need to identify the issues and just not get one of those pavers that has too wide a gap. But they do have them that are working well and they perform well over time. One of the other challenges to a permeable driveway is if you have a slope of greater than 5%, you have to have some higher level design underneath to create storage bays, essentially, because otherwise it just falls out of the pavement at the bottom. It goes down too fast. So you have to give it a bin to fall into with a check dam underneath the surface, so you don't ever see it, but it's there, and that is a more expensive solution if you have a steep driveway.
Okay, I have a number of questions about maintenance, but I don't want to miss out on the rest of your slides. So if we could do a
How
few
much more time
questions
do you
about
want to give me?
maintenance at the end.
All right, so if you're planning your rainscape, you want to look at your site. If you've gone through a basic garden design, you know, you do a site inventory and you're looking for, you know, sun angle, you're looking for slope, you're looking for a soil test. Now we want to also add into that inventory, where is the water coming from, how much, how often, and then you want to think about how long does it take to dry out. So there's where the shade is. And then you also want to think, where can the water be moved to safely? So like that case of the aqueduct, where the water was flooding down in the basement, they really had to think outside the box and go, well, what if we intercepted it before it got down to that level? And so that's how the aqueduct gets figured out, right? Because you're intercepting it higher up, so you can move it to a place that the water wouldn't naturally go to, but you can put the water there because you're working with gravity. You don't have to have a pump. So you want to identify what you have now, like, do we have an invasive problem? You know, what do I want to grow? What am I trying to do here besides just manage the water? So you're going to think about that. That's your first step. Then you're going to go out when it rains and see what kind of problem you actually have. Do you have a concentrated stream flow, or do you just have muckiness? And, you know, you can see this right here. Oh, this is a real rainscape project that really got solved with the rainscape through a series of step down check dams. And then this down here is a big dry well. That's not really the rainscape, but this was the entry point so that this grassy area that was on top of the dry well could support the dogs that were going to play on it. And maybe they talk to the neighbor about getting their stupid pipe off of their property. You know, this is not good neighborliness. So you really want to understand, do I have a little problem that would be nice and I should spend the time? Or do I have a huge problem that's going to take a series of steps, and maybe the best I can do is slow it down some and safely give it passage around me to a bigger space somewhere else? When it's not raining, you want to look at the condition of your soil. So you're going to be looking for evidence of flow. You know, has the silt been settling in one spot, like over here by the fence? Are there exposed tree roots, which would imply that things are compacted? You want to see if you can see here, there's no grass, and you know that this is getting water that comes all around here, and they wanted to create this as a little tiki island. You're going to be looking for erosion spots. You know, oh, I've got stilt grass, that's not a good thing. And then you're going to look at your house and figure out, well, can I put the rain garden here? You know, my downspout could be extended out, and then it could pond right here. This is going to be drier on the berm, wetter in the bottom. I have a safe place for it to overflow. Oh, look, I can get the back one and I can pull it in here. So you're going to be starting to problem solve and puzzle master your own yard, looking for those opportunities. If you have an iPad, this is a great fun tool, or you can, or even your phone anymore, you can take a picture and then you can map where the water's going, and you can start to doodle away and think about, well, if I put a gravel trench here, I could get the water off the pavement faster, so it'll be less likely to ice. And then it's going to overflow into this rain garden, and then that's going to go into a conservation landscape. And this is very quick. So this isn't high-tech scale drawing. This is just conceptual thinking. When you're thinking about where a rain garden can go, you want to think about how you're getting the water to move. Is it a stone swale? Is it a planted swale? Is it a buried pipe? And if it's a buried pipe, you want the bottom of that pipe to be above the highest level of the ponding. That's very important. And then you want your plant selection here. We have a plant selection tool. It is not currently on our website, and I will email that to Steve later, and he can share it with you all, but it is very handy for figuring out how many kinds of plants. So water comes off of your house, comes comes down here, and people think, oh, this is the low spot where all the water is. We actually think the garden should be up here before it concentrates. And that's a better position for it. You want to be 10 feet from your foundation, and you want to have a safe place for it to overflow. So here's an example where you've got 2 rooftops. You could put a rain garden here and put a berm in here, and it's not a huge amount of drainage. It's, you know, less than 1,000 square feet. And then, but if you look at the rest of the property, you've got a swale here. You can see it in the topo. You know, there's the topo, and this is going to be too big. You can have a bioswale here with all those tree roots and slope. Your rain garden's up here dealing with the roof, and so you have a system that's working together. You can have little places, you know, right along this walkway. There's a little rain garden right here with the berm, and then it'll overflow over there. Conservation landscapes are a lot easier to site, because the green areas are the only places on this property where it would be really effective to have a rain garden. But look at all this area here. All of this could be conservation landscape. This wouldn't be a rebate project because it's not getting runoff unless it was getting the neighbor's runoff. It's not getting any runoff from this house. But all of this could be conservation landscape, all that in yellow. The fun thing about rainscapes, rain gardens, is, you know, that there can be unexpected surprises. So this is going to come in here, and then it's just accenting this patio, but they've left a grassy strip so the dog can get through without having to walk in the garden. I want to remind you that when you're doing any kind of excavation, you want to stay outside the drip line of the tree, avoid those tree roots. And then just to summarize conservation landscapes, and I don't, the red dots from previous, I apologize for it. Lots of tree roots, a slope site, slowly draining water, and that means through the soil, not over the top. Large offsite drainage area, and it can be catching your rain garden overflow. So rain gardens are up to 12% slope, catching roof water, and the 12% limit on slope is really has to do with, unless you have a wall, like I showed you a couple of examples of rain garden planters. Once you get above 12%, you have to have a wall. Up until 12%, you can have a berm, which is like a big smile laying on the downhill side of the slope. We also, you know, the permeable pavers and pavement removal. Green roofs, we have very few of those, in water harvesting, but we have a little summary sheet of what kind of project you could choose. When you create that plan for biodiversity, you're going from this Pachysandra to this more ecological design. You want to slow it down and spread it out. This rain garden is catching, this is a Strathmore Place, and it's catching the roofs of 5 different ones. And then the water can overflow here. There's a storm drain across the street, and it keeps most of the water out of that storm drain. And you want to amend that soil, and then you want to have your planting design. So what's in a planting design? Like I said, are you managing a lot of water? What's the soil like? What's your light condition like? Do you have specific things you want to attract, like hummingbirds? Do you know how you can maintain this? And then you're going to look at plant lists and some templates. You want to think about what your goals are. So in this example, it could have been all hostas, which of course would be eaten by the deer. So if you like that whole peaceful look, you could substitute a sedge. And it turns out sedges are very good for little birds. They eat the seeds, and they like to use the nesting material from the sedges as well. That's from Brookside Gardens. What kinds of plants for rainscapes? You want to think of things that are flexible. They have plasticity, so they can handle extreme drought. They can handle extreme moisture. They can handle flow. They can handle pollution. They want to have resilience. So you're going to able to have that overlapping bloom time. Flood and drought tolerant species. You want to have something going in the garden in that space at all times, and you may be layering plants vertically and having that structural diversity. You want to group plants by community type, and the community type, I talked about this mixed oak forest. So I want to give you an example of a low wet zone. So these are all plants that live in a low wet zone that are very attractive to a lot of nice things like cardinal flower. Winterberry holly is very good for all kinds of birds. Sweet pepper bush is a great summer pollinator plant. Bee balm attracts bees and other things. Royal fern, cinnamon fern, white turtlehead supports our checker spot. The switchgrass provides nesting material, and yet this just looks like a garden, right? But it's actually a plant community. Here's another example of a bottomland community that turned into a garden, and these plants are perfectly well adapted to live next to each other. So they're not fighting with each other. They're happily coexisting. You want to map your floral resources. So this is a phenology chart, and you can actually start to take an inventory of what do you have in your garden that is blooming, and when does it bloom, and what does it support. And then some people are very artistic, of course, and they can create these beautiful phenology charts, and then put in this parts of the moon. They can map the weather. You might try that for a month and see what you think. What do you see and what kind of flower? And this is a way that you can increase your habitat diversity by recognizing that, oh, I thought I had coverage, but I just discovered in late August, I've got nothing. So now you're going to hunt for those plants that will give you something in late August. So you can be mimicking them, whether it's this upland meadows species set at a pool or this stream edge species set, very simple river oats and pacra, or this wet meadow woods edge species, this is in a green street garden. So these are all handling stormwater. This has got switchgrass and clethra and black-eyed Susans. So you can get inspiration from our local ecology. And within the rain garden, you're going to be thinking about what the conditions are in the rain garden. So the water flowing in is going to be hottest and dirtiest. On the far side, it's going to be drier most of the time on the berm. And then in the middle, you're going to have your wet meadow species like Cherokee sedge with Joe Pye, or you're going to have clethra or something like that. And so you're going to choose plants that give you a big bang for your buck, whether this iris versicolor has proved to be a super winner in our environment. Pacra is another one. It's got something in the leaves that actually has some toxicity to deer, so they don't tend to eat it. And there's an upland form as well as the lowland form. And then, of course, river oats, which have a bad reputation, but if you have dry shade and flowing water, they're a really good choice. You're trying to manage water flow, and the sedges can really help with that ground layer, underplanting all your shrubs, and you're armoring entry points. So you can see there's stone here that stabilizes it before it gets to the sedge. And you can see this pop up right here, and then the water's going to be dispersed and dissipated. When you are thinking about plants, you want plants that can really hold soil. So in all of these plants, whether it's Lindhaven carpet or it's Salvia lyrata or the sedges, they're all really good at holding soil. So basic design rules apply too. This is that rain garden conservation landscape at a downspout that I showed you earlier. So right plant, right place. What's the visual goal? What's your water goal? What's your wildlife goal? And how can you phase it? So the plan, it's got the big vision here, but they've realized they're just doing this for now, this small piece right here. Some design tips, aside from looking at plant communities and thinking about your garden style, is to look at all 4 seasons in your soil conditions and manage that flow as close to the source as possible. Don't let it become a big problem. Plan for your light conditions. Make that measured drawing and use our Rainscapes resources to figure out how many plants you need. The calculator, the Excel spreadsheet's not on there, but our spacing chart is on our website. When you want to think about pollinators, you want to think about larger groupings of plants rather than polka dots. You want to give them a good target to be able to come down. And then you should be starting to think about cutting things back because it is spring. But, you know, if you've been able to hold off till now, congratulations. It's really hard to hold off until April to cut your garden back. So think about what your next steps are. We do have a rebate. These are really great references. All of these books are talking about creating gardens that are in balance with nature. We have our resources. So I put this up just to show you the names, and several of them have been replicated and made master gardener sheets with your own plants on them. But the way you find them is to go to our website. The ones we put out look like this, and they show you what they attract and what the light condition is. When it's got a little snowflake, that tells you that you see something in the winter. If you are going to do a project, we want you to do something that is legible. It must be legible. It will be sent back if it's not legible, and if it's not to this very simple standard. But you won't. Our spacing is based on filling within a year without overgrowing the space. And that does mean, happy news, you'll have more plants for your plant swap. Our spacing guidance looks like this. It's a 4-pager, and it addresses the different categories of plants. And then there's a chart, you know, how many plants do I need? And what if I'm using landscape plugs, and, you know, how to be successful. We have templates for rain gardens, which can be adapted to be used for conservation landscapes. And we have these conservation landscape templates, which for some unknown reason are not on our website. And I will send the PDF that can be shared. But those conservation landscapes look like this. And these rectangles here or squares can be used like tiles. So you can actually make a pattern with this module. And if you don't like Rhus aromatica grow low, you can come over to the alternatives and find them on the plant index. So it is searchable. These are the rain garden templates. They have a little more information in terms of vertical, and the pictures are a bit bigger, but it's the same concept. These were done first, and the conservation landscapes were done second. There are other places where you can look for kits. They're not specifically rainscapes, but they could be put into rainscapes, like this sun dry soil. Actually, all of these plants would do well in a rainscape. All of these plants would do well in a rainscape, and all of these would do well in a rainscape. And so that's another online source. Of course, National Wildlife and Audubon have their plant finders. National Wildlife, and also there is the Native Plant Center, which is through the Alliance, Native Plant Center Chesapeake Bay is Alliance for the Bay. So 3 great plant finders for plants in our region. We do have pictures up on our Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and we do have some Pinterest boards. But really, gardens are being asked to perform more and more functions. They reduce runoff, provide pollinator support, be predominantly native, meet the community aesthetic. So don't get on the cross sides of your HOA. Be sustainable, and then pesticide free and sequester carbon. I want to go back to meeting the community aesthetic. One of the things I did during COVID is I created I think it's about 30 square feet garden of everything that was under 12 inches. And it's been really interesting because I put it in the right of way, and every dog pees on it. And it's actually, I know which ones are going to perform in that kind of tough environment, but I can't see that it would be at odds unless it was very specific in an HOA that it had to be grass. All of these gardens that I've shown you today are compost amended native soils. They've all established rapidly and they infiltrate well. And you have to get the carbon deeper, and you only do that through roots. You could map your projects on Homegrown National Park. This is Doug Tallamy's initiative, and you get your garden on the map. And he said that if everybody would do this, we could, if everybody would put in a native garden, take out half their turf, we could have a larger land area than all of the national parks combined. To apply, we have a 1, 2, 3 process. We are open. We anticipate when we get to 400 applications for the year, we'll close until August 15th. But these are available. Not only they are available in English, and they are also available in Spanish. I don't know if the Spanish ones are posted, and they're actually also available in Vietnamese because we had a special request. So that's it.
And would you remind us the website that you've been referring to?
So you go to just type in rainscapes.org. That's our shortcut
Great.
to the county website.
And
you
I
can-
will remind everyone, we had several questions come in. The recording of this presentation will be available soon on the website. I share the frustration that several of you have expressed about the tremendous amount of information that Anne has shared with us. It's going to be great to be able to go back and look at it again. We couldn't take our notes fast enough, Anne, to keep up with you.
Yeah, well, it just, like I said, I've been doing this a very long time, and I apologize if it was too much information, but I tried to cut it down actually quite significantly. There's just a lot to learn, and nobody's going to get it on the first go, or the second go, or the third go, and I learn things still every day.
And I want to give a quick shout out here to Ann Claxton. If you weren't monitoring the chat during the presentation, Ann put in a very nice reminder to all of us that our Baywise program has lots of these resources, and we could start our work right at home by taking a look at our own website and talking more with people who are in the Baywise project. So, Steve, I think we're past 11:30. Some of us still have curiosity about maintenance demands and how much we need to do with weeding and whether or not we can change these gardens over time. But I think we may have to leave that for another discussion.
I think you're right. I think there's a lot to discuss here, like Ann was mentioning, and there's a lot of information. So I know Ann's going to share some of the websites of items that aren't on the website right now, and I'll follow through with that. I know Ann was saying she has to probably go pick up some Rainscape plants here. She's out there like all of us out there, working indoors, outdoors, getting the plants in the ground. But I want to take this opportunity to thank Ann for providing all the information she has. I'm actually sitting in here, Ann. I put my headset on because I'm printing out one of your docs. So that's great. And so again, thank Ann. I want to thank our tech team and all our folks who helped support today's presentation. I'm going to be around here in the office till at least 3 o'clock. I'll be here tomorrow if anybody needs to pick up items. Again, thanks to everyone. We'll wrap things up here and hope you guys get outside. Looks like the rain is finally holding off. So hopefully you can get outside there. So thanks everybody and have a good day. I'll stick around if anybody has any questions. But
I will just say
go ahead.
that if there are any questions that come in afterwards, you can email them to me, Steve, and I can answer them that way.
I'll work with Chuck. We'll get on the chat and we'll send those over to you. Okay.
All right.
Awesome. Thank you,
Thanks
everyone.
for your time, everybody.